Nagarjuna, Philosopher and Alchemist. When an unenlightened man pretends to be a Siddha, he is like a rebel trying to usurp the king. When an enlightened man persists in folly, he is like an elephant stuck in the mud. Many years ago, in Kahora, in the eastern kingdom of Kanchi, there lived a Brahmin youth of dazzling intellectual powers. By the time he was 20, he could recite from memory all the known Brahmin texts and had even attained the magical gift of invisibility. But then he grew bored and dissatisfied with his scholarly life. It all seemed empty and sterile to him, and he threw himself headlong into a life of sensual pleasure. Before long, there was hardly a household in Kahora he had not plundered of its blossoming maidens and ripe young wives. Nagarjuna's libertine exploits grew so daring that finally he devised a plan to slip into the king's palace with 3 friends to have their way with the royal favorites. Alas, they were discovered and pursued. Nagarjuna escaped by standing invisible next to the king himself, but his 3 friends were beheaded. The entire district was in an uproar. The Brahmins of Kahora gathered in a council to confer about what to do. They discussed this plan and that plan, but in the end they all despaired of finding a way to control the rampaging bull in their midst. Sadly, all the Brahmins decided they would all simply have to emigrate to another district and leave the people to their nemesis. But this time Nagarjuna himself was caught in a storm of self-disgust. The Brahmin's decision was the final blow. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief on the day Nagarjuna went willingly, but with much chagrin, into exile. Frustrated and dissatisfied with his life, he set out on a spiritual quest with the same energy he had previously invested in debauchery. Journeying to the far side of the cool garden cremation ground, he sought and was given initiation in the doctrine of the Buddha. He next journeyed to the famous monastic academy of Srilananda, where he studied the 5 arts and sciences until he could recite the academy's entire library from memory. But, ever growing in the center of his being, spiritual dissatisfaction again sent out shoots of unrest. Books were no longer sufficient, and so he began to practice a meditation propitiating Tara, the Savioress. When her face appeared before him in his practice, he abandoned the security of the monastery and took up the life of a mendicant monk. He traveled far and wide, begging in towns and villages. But still Nagarjuna was not at peace. When he lay down at night, he would think to himself, I am but a worthless wretch. Of what use am I to anyone? He next decided to go on retreat in Rajagriha. There he began to propitiate the elemental consorts by chanting mantras. He began by propitiating the 12 consorts of the Supreme Elemental. On the first day of his retreat, an earthquake shook the countryside. On the second day, the river overflowed its banks and there was a vast flood. On the third day, a holocaust of fire descended from the heavens. On the fourth day, a tremendous windstorm blew up. On the 5th day, a shower of spears fell point first from the sky. On the 6th day, Vajra thunderbolts hurtled down. On the 7th day, the 12 consorts gathered in all their might to attack and overwhelm the meditator. But no matter what they did, they could not distract him, even for a fraction of a second. He remained steadfast in his inviolable commitment. Acknowledging his mastery, the female elementals drew near him. Ask, and you shall receive, they said humbly. I don't really need anything, Nagarjuna replied, except, perhaps, a daily supply of food to sustain me through my retreat. Then, each day thereafter, for 12 years, the elementals brought him 4 handfuls of rice and 5 handfuls of vegetables. By the end of his sadhana, all 108 elemental consorts were under his control. Renewed and infused with new purpose, Nagarjuna set forth with the clear intention of serving all sentient beings. As his first act, he decided to turn Gandasila mountain into pure gold. Moving in stages, he first changed the mountain to solid iron. Next, he changed it into gleaming copper. But just as he was about to transform it into gold, the voice of the Bodhisattva Manjushri rang out. What makes you think you are aiding all sentient beings by turning this mountain into gold? Asked the divine voice. It will cause great conflict and strife. How do you think you can help mundane beings with gold? It will only provoke greater sin and evil. Nagarjuna acknowledged the greater wisdom of the Bodhisattva and abandoned his project. To this very day, Gandasila mountain has a deep coppery color. Next, he traveled far to the south until he came to the banks of a broad river near Sri Parvata mountain. When he asked some herdsmen to direct him to a safe ford, they led him to the most dangerous part of the river. It was bounded by steep stony banks and infested with crocodiles. Yet the herdsmen insisted it was the safest place to cross. But just as the yogin was about to step into the water, another herdsman took pity on him and warned him of the great danger. He was a big, burly man with a hearty voice, and Nagarjuna trusted him at once. I'll take you to a safe crossing, holy sir, said the herdsman, and he led the yogin to another ford. Climb up on my shoulders, he said. I'll get you to the other side, and dry too. But suddenly, without warning, in the middle of the crossing, they were surrounded by ravening crocodiles, thrashing and churning the water into white foam. You have nothing to fear as long as I am alive, shouted the trusty herdsman, and he walked right straight through the melee, landing his passenger safely on the other side. Do you recognize me? Asked the yogin, turning to the herdsman. I am Arya Nagarjuna. I have heard of you, replied the herdsman, suddenly overcome with awe. You may have whatever your heart desires for carrying me safely across the river, said Nagarjuna, neglecting to mention that it was he who had conjured up the crocodiles as a test. Without a moment's hesitation, the herdsman replied, Make me a king. Whereupon the master splashed some river water against a nearby sal tree, and it was immediately transformed into a magnificent white elephant with royal trappings. It bowed low before the new king and assisted him to mount with its trunk. How about an army? The king called down to Nagarjuna. When the elephant trumpets, the army will appear, O king, the yogin replied. Just then, the blast of the elephant's call shook the forest, and in the twinkling of an eye, an entire army appeared, magnificently outfitted and armed, ready to march. In time, the herdsman came to be known as King Salabanda. With his wife, Queen Sindhi, he ruled over 8,400,000 households with great wisdom and benevolence. But he too was infected with the same dissatisfaction that plagued his master, and after a number of years, the herdsman turned king went on pilgrimage searching for his guru. When he found him, he prostrated himself before Nagarjuna and walked around him in propitiating circles for some time before he dared to open up his heart. This business of governing isn't anything like I thought it would be, he confessed at last. It is my heart's desire to renounce my kingdom. Please, let me stay here with you from now on. No, said Nagarjuna, I cannot allow you to do that. However, take this precious rosary as your preceptor. It will protect you and your kingdom. And I will also give you the divine nectar that confers both immortality and fearlessness in the face of death upon those who taste its honeyed sweetness. If you will promise me that a time will come when I can stay here with you always, then I will accept your gifts and return to my kingdom. But if the answer is no, I don't want either of them. We shall see, replied Nagarjuna, quashing all his disciples' complaints with instruction on the art of alchemy, the source of the nectar of immortality, and he sent him back to his people for another 100 years. During that span, Salabanda's kingdom prospered. The harvests were abundant, and all the people and creatures of his realm thrived and multiplied. During these happy years, Nagarjuna spread the teachings of the Buddha from one end to the land to the other. But in the fullness of time, the wheel of existence turned once more. Just as it began to appear that this golden age would last forever, the evil spirit known as Sundarananda grew jealous and resentful of the king. He nursed his grievances until his power grew so great that portents of doom appeared in the land. The light and warmth of the sun itself began to diminish, and the face of the blessed moon disappeared from the night sky. Fruit fell from the trees before it was ripe, rains came at the wrong time, and famine ravaged the land. The fields and forests withered and turned yellow, and an age of sickness and war began. King Salabanda interpreted these ominous signs to mean that his guru was in mortal danger. Yielding his throne to his eldest son, he traveled with a few of his most faithful servants to sit at the feet of Nagarjuna. When the master asked him why he had come, the king sang him a lament. Why has misfortune befallen us? Why has the Buddha's doctrine failed us? Why are the powers of darkness rising? Why have evil storm clouds eclipsed the whiteness of the moon, the compassion of Maha Karunika? Is my holy Guru, the indestructible diamond, falling prey to decay and death? Evil portents have driven me here. I pray you, bestow upon us your compassionate grace. The master sang him in reply. All birth ends in death. All creation ends in dissolution. All accumulation ends in dispersion. All that appears real is transitory. Ignore these omens. Come, drink the elixir of fearlessness. But no sooner had the last notes of Nagarjuna's song died away than the king's greatest fear came to pass. The Guru gave away all his worldly goods and prepared for death. The great god Brahma appeared in the guise of a Brahmin to beg for the master's head. But when Nagarjuna agreed, King Salabanda's heart broke. Grief-stricken, he laid his own head at his guru's feet and died. The gathered populace cursed the Brahmin for his request. To a man, they all refused to decapitate the master. Eventually, Nagarjuna was forced to take a stalk of kusha grass and perform the deed himself. When it was done, the master took his own severed head in his hands and handed it to the Brahmin. All green things withered, and the virtue and merit of man faded from the land. 8 yakshis, the female elementals so faithful to his service, came to stand guard over Nagarjuna's body, and they stand there still. After the master's death, a great light entered the body of Nagabodhi, Nagarjuna's spiritual son and successor. To this very day, that light radiates like the beams of a full moon on the clearest of nights. When the teachings and loving kindness of Maitreya, the Buddha yet to come, encompass the earth, Nagarjuna will rise again to serve us all. Nimo Deleg Sendeleg, Nime Gungyandeleg Shin, Ninsendadu Deleg Be, Kunjo Sumgi Jingilo, Kunjo Sumgi Ngadropso, Kunjo Sumgi Tashi Sho. At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.